You're floating in a little boat and you've tied yourself to the bitter end to a city bus that is extremely upset with you. Hey everyone, it's me, Mike. We've just finished our first reading of Moby Dick, Etymology and Extracts. If you want to watch the reading, which is me reading the chapters that we are about to talk about, that is also up on the channel right now. This video is the one where we're going to try to break down what we just read. I think the first thing to say is congratulations and good job. This is not an easy opening to a book. I think a lot of us heading into this book for the first time think we're about to get into a whaling epic, but that is not how this book starts. Instead, we start with Melville getting really deep into what we call a whale, how we position the whale in our minds, the language we hang on the whale. And then we move into a collection of quotes he's gathered about whales, all reflecting many different thoughts, perspectives, and tones. Before we get deep into the reading, I think the first question is, why? Why does the book start like this? Why isn't this in an appendix? Because it's not. In some printings of Moby Dick, etymology and extracts were moved to the end of the book, but that is not where Melville intended it to be. It belongs in the front. Melville put it there for a reason. So the question is, what is Melville trying to do by putting it there? So disclaimer, I don't know a lot about Moby Dick, and I'm not doing a lot of outside research. This is just me trying to interpret it. If you have a different perspective on the reading or a different opinion on how to interpret it, drop it in the comments. I would really like to read it. Back to the question, why? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, what Melville has tried to do in this book, he's not trying to just tell us the story of hunting a whale, and that's going to become apparent as we move forward. This is not a literal story about hunting a whale. This story is about wrestling with things that are beyond you. Melville is going to go to great lengths to position the whale and the hunt for this whale in our minds almost as an attack on God. It's really important to Melville that in our heads, we understand the full weight and size of this thing we're about to undertake. So what he does first is he tries to frame the whale in our minds. And also he tries to frame the impossibility of the task. Melville basically says, before we get into this, you need to understand some stuff. You think you understand what's about to happen, but you don't. And you're going to need some of this stuff in your brain if you're going to grasp what we're about to go through. Jumping into etymology, we're already in trouble. We're in trouble from moment one. The story begins, supplied by a late consumptive usher to a grammar school. The pale usher, threadbare in coat, heart, body, and brain, I see him now. First of all, who's the pale usher? The story has begun. We're in the story. Who is this pale usher? It's not Melville, and it's not Ishmael, who may or may not be the main character of the rest of the book that we're going to read. This pale usher who dusts his old lexicons, we don't actually know who this character is. The other thing we don't know is who is the I? The pale usher, threadbare in coat, heart, body, and brain, I see him now. Who is I? Is that Melville? Is it Ishmael? Is it us? Is it God? There's already two characters in here who are outside of the story, but inside of the book. There's so much that we could unpack about that. All I could really say is, I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what they're doing in the story. The pale usher seems kind of sad. It may seem strange that etymology is here, but it does two things that are very important. Number one, it separates this book from an adventure book. It's closer to an academic text. There's an undercurrent through this whole book, and etymology is the start of Melville attempting to author not just a whaling story, but an authoritative, complete account of everything there is to understand about whales, their value to Western society, the pursuit of whaling, the biology, all of it. All of it. Etymology is the establishing document that says what you are about to experience is not just a whaling story. The second thing that etymology does that's really important is establish the omnipresence of the whale. Melville shows us right at the beginning, everyone has a name for this thing. This thing is everywhere. This thing is important. And through these things, Melville is trying to help us understand what we're about to walk into and why it matters. So that's etymology. Moving into extracts, we've left behind the pale usher and the I, who could be me or you or Melville or Ishmael or someone else. We leave them behind, and now we're in extracts, which was supplied by a sub-librarian. Who is that? This painstaking burrower, this grubworm of a sub-librarian. It basically says this person has gathered a bunch of quotes about whales. Who are they? Why did they do that? So fare thee well, poor devil of a sub, whose commentator I am. Again, who is the I? Is this the same I from etymology? Is it Melville? Who is it? Those are just questions without answers. We do learn a little bit about this sub-librarian. The sub-librarian is painted as a person who's going to great lengths to make other people happy. It says, for by how much the more pains ye take to please the world, by so much the more shall ye forever go thankless. The more you try to please the world, the worse it's going to be for you, basically. I really think this is Melville talking to himself and us and saying, don't focus on making the world happy, focus on yourself. It says, gulp down your tears and hie aloft to the royal mast with your hearts. Don't take all of these pains to please the world, because the more you do, the more thankless this world is going to become. Instead, swallow your tears, climb the mast, and go on your adventure, or live your truth, or whatever. It's almost like Melville's gassing himself up for the reception he expects to receive for this book. There's something else he says right here at the start of Extracts. Basically, he says it's going to look like somebody gathered every possible thing there is to say about a whale. However, you shouldn't take this as all that there is to be said. As touching the ancient authors generally, as well as the poets here appearing, these extracts are solely valuable or entertaining as affording a glancing bird's eye view of what has been promiscuously said, thought, fancied, and sung of Leviathan. He's saying all of these quotes that have been gathered here are gonna barely cover this. It's gonna seem like a lot. It's gonna seem complete, but all of this in here is not gonna come close. Melville's again telling us right at the jump, you can't understand this. You're not gonna understand the whale. You're especially not gonna understand what it means to chase the whale just by reading these extracts. All of these extracts, as complete as they may be, offer us only a glancing bird's eye view. And it's not literal. I don't think it's literal. I don't think he's saying you're never going to understand what a whale is. That's not what he means. This book is an artifact of and a story of chasing something that's beyond you, of grasping something profound and impossible. And what Melville is telling us right at the start is that even if you find everything that's ever been said about the thing you're trying to understand, it's not going to get you there. You're never going to get it. You're just going to have that bird's eye view. But importantly, he doesn't tell us not to do it. He doesn't tell us to stop or not to keep going. He just gives us this disclaimer. So that's the thematic stuff. And we could talk about that probably all day. But let's get into the extracts. And in here, I'm going to share some that I think are important. I'm also going to share some that I like or that are my favorites. If you've got favorite extracts, I'd like to hear yours too. The first one is extremely important. It says, "And God created whales." Genesis. This is the first sentence. This is the first extract. And it matters. It matters because as we go through Moby Dick, you're going to see that it's a very religious text. We're going to often see Melville wrestling with Christianity and religion. And he's going to spend time talking about it. There are sermons in this book. There's Christianity in this book. There's prayers in this book. There are other religions in this book. And Ishmael examines his relationship to all of them. Starting the book right here sets a formal precedent that God and the whale are connected. From here on out, these two things are intertwined. And that thematic connection is going to be echoed over and over again. Here's a side note. In the extracts, there's a reference called Ebede. I thought that this was an obscure author who wrote a lot about whales. It's actually a Latin abbreviation, which means in the same place. Anytime there's two quotes back to back and the second quote says Ebede, it means it came from the same source as the first quote. I did not know that until I made this video. Here's another extract I really love. "And the breath of the whale is frequently attended with such an insupportable smell as to bring on a disorder of the brain." I think it's really funny that there is a quote in here that says, "The whale's mouth is so stinky that if you smell it, your brain will stop working." Also, it is funny, but there's something to be said about the tonal shift here, because Extracts doesn't have a singular, solemn tone. What's been established so far has made us feel like we're about to step into something very serious, but then we run into some of these extracts that are kind of fun or funny, It almost communicates to us that this book is going to really try to cover every side of this thing, not just the serious and the weighty. Here's another extract. If we compare land animals in respect to magnitude with those that take up their abode in the deep, we shall find they appear contemptible in the comparison. The whale is doubtless the largest animal in creation. Melville is going to spend a lot of time in this book trying to get us to understand how big a whale is, because whales are big and a sperm whale is huge. A sperm whale can be up to 60 feet long. If you've ever been on one of those city buses, that's not one bus, it's two buses, and it's got an accordion thing in the middle so it can go around corners, that's about 60 feet. That's how big a sperm whale is. And in the abstract, that's really hard to parse. Throughout the book, Melville is going to continually remind us of the size of this whale. He's also saying in this extract, if you've never hunted a whale, you've never hunted anything. A whale is the only real thing a man could ever hunt, and a sperm whale especially. Anything else? Baby stuff. It's baby stuff. Here's another quote. "My God, Mr. Chase, what is the matter?" I answered, "We have been stove by a whale." This one I also think is kind of funny, but it's a good quote because it shows that sometimes whales attack boats. And it sets a tone for the future. For those reasons, it's a good quote. I pulled this quote because the attribution is so long, and I think the attribution being that long is really funny. The attribution reads, "Narrative of the shipwreck of the whale ship Essex of Nantucket, which was attacked and finally destroyed by a large sperm whale in the Pacific Ocean by Owen Chase of Nantucket, first mate of said vessel New York, 1821. Here's another extract that I really like. "It is impossible to meet a whale ship on the ocean without being struck by her near appearance. The vessel under short sail, with lookouts at the mastheads, eagerly scanning the wide expanse around them, has a totally different air from those engaged in regular voyage." Spoiler, it's going to be a while before we actually get on a ship in this book, but this is such a great extract for helping us get into our heads the visual of the whaling ship. Men hanging off the top of a ship, cruising over an infinite horizon, and they're watching. They're looking for something. They're not going from one place to the other or carting goods here or there. And later, Ishmael is going to talk about the different relationships that fishermen have with the sea compared to people who just sail upon it. The whalemen, these men on the masts, they're out there for a reason. They are looking to the horizon, searching for something. Just like us, just like Ishmael, just like Melville. Having that visual seared into our brains this early is going to help us with the mental vocabulary for all the things we're going to bear witness to later. This next one is my favorite extract. "The whale is harpooned to be sure, but bethink you how you would manage a powerful, unbroken colt with the mere appliance of a rope tied to the root of his tail." It again sets the stakes of hunting and killing a whale, but it also helps us with a mental math for imagining how difficult it is. The idea here is tie a rope to the tip of the tail of an unbroken horse and then try to wrangle it. Imagine doing that, because you've seen a horse probably. Imagine you tie a little rope to the tip of its tail and then you try to bring that thing in. Could you do it? Would it be enough? The other thing that this extract does is it tells us harpooning the whale is not the end of the story. In our heads, if we don't know anything about whaling, we've maybe come to this tale with the idea that you just throw a harpoon in there and you got him. What this extract helps us understand is, no, you don't. You get a harpoon in him, and it's like that little rope on the tip of the colt's tail. You have a long way to go. If you think about whether you could even wrangle a horse with a rope tied to its tail and how dangerous that would be for you. That's what it's like when you've harpooned a whale. And the whale is much bigger than a horse, and it's in the sea. You're in a boat. You're not standing next to it. You're floating in a little boat in an ocean that might not be cooperating, and you've tied yourself to the bitter end to a city bus that is extremely upset with you. Getting the harpoon in is just the first step of one of the most difficult, dangerous things you will ever do in your entire life. I feel like this quote, more than any other quote in extracts, sets up for us how insane and impossible a task it is to kill a sperm whale. And then, of course, as we move forward in this story, we're going to learn about a specific sperm whale who's more than unbroken. So that one is my favorite. It's my favorite extract. Thinking about this one really frames in my mind what we're in for. Then, right at the end, one last extract. "Oh, the rare old whale, mid storm and gale, in his ocean ocean home will be, a giant in might, where might is right, and king of the boundless sea. It's a great way to close out the chapter. It gives us this poetic, evocative moment before we step into the beginning of our journey, but it also reinforces everything that's come before. The ocean is the whale's home, not yours. A giant in might, where might is right. This is the strongest thing out there. The whale is the strongest thing out there in a place, by the way, where being strong matters. A lot, actually. And then, of course, and king of the boundless sea, telling us in this infinite expanse, there is one thing that is king. It's the whale, and we are about to lower against it. Those are the extracts that I think are important and the ones that I like. As we talked about earlier, there's some question as to why the book starts like this. Why does the book start by breaking down the language of the whale and going through all of these extracts? Why doesn't it just begin with Ishmael setting out on an adventure? Having come through all of this and asking ourselves all of these questions, I think it's obvious why the book starts this way. We now have some idea of what we're in for. We possess the vocabulary. We have a mental image of the size and scale of the whale and the ship that hunts it. We understand the severity of the chase. We understand the difficulty of the task. And now we understand that we understand nothing. And we're not even close to getting it. We've gotten all that already. We have the stakes of this story, and we haven't even met a character yet. We know that this is going to be a story about men chasing a whale. What we're beginning to grasp is the danger that they are in. We're beginning to brush up against what it means to undertake the journey we are undertaking. That's why this is the beginning of the book. And it's one of the examples, of which there will be many, of why this is not an adventure book about whaling. It is about something else entirely. Etymology and extracts are here to help lay the foundation for our quest against this thing that we can barely comprehend, for our chase of the impossible or the profound. And this beginning is one of the things that is unique about Moby Dick. Before we wrap up, here's my question for you. We know that this book begins with etymology and extracts. Did it always? Do you think this was always the beginning of the book? Do you think that when Melville sat down to write this book, he started here? Or do you think Melville added it later to help frame the story that he had created? There might be a real answer out there for this question, by the way. I don't know if there is. I certainly have an opinion, and I will share it with you in next week's analysis video. For now, I want to hear your comments and your thoughts on whether this was always here. That's it for this week, and it was a lot. Etymology and extracts are very difficult chapters, and the fact that they're the beginning of the book makes it even more difficult. You should congratulate yourself. If you read etymology and extracts, you should congratulate yourself because it is not easy. They are dense and challenging chapters. The good news is, next week we're going to be reading Loomings and the Carpetbag, chapter 1, chapter 2. These are much shorter chapters. They're also much more fun. You will have a good time, I promise. If you like what's going on here, like, subscribe, leave a comment, back the Patreon, whatever works for you. Read along with us. Read Moby Dick. You'll really like it, I promise. And I'm going to be here with you every week breaking it down so we can do it together. That's it for me this week. Until I see you again, please be good, be kind, don't kick any puppies. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week. Don't forget, leave your comments about etymology and extracts on this video. I want to know what y'all thought of this very unique beginning to this very unique book.